This is the Conrad Alert. Civil defense information will be broadcast at 6:40.
West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Y2K, how can we prepare?
Stop a few of their machines and radios. Throw them into darkness for a few hours.
We are fighting for our lives. My family must survive.
Oh, for 5 years. 1,000 gallons of gas, air filtration, water filtration.
Coming at you from the frozen tundra that is East Central Alberta, Canada, streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and Odyssey. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. I am Toolman Tim. Today is January the 21st, 2024, and this is episode 418 of Workshop Radio. How are all my crazy delinquents out there? We're just ever so slightly a little bit late, and I apologize for you folks, but we are good and ready to go. So, you know what? We're going to forego some of the pleasantries at the very beginning, and we are going to bring on a friend of mine. And you guys, anyway, I'm not going to spoil anything, but he has stories upon stories to tell. Not going to spoil anymore. Let's bring on Mr. TheBeeManJay. Hey, B, how are BJ? TheBeeManJay, how are you?
Careful. This is a G show, right?
Oh, man. How are you, brother?
Pretty good. How about you?
Not bad at all. You guys surviving the super deep freeze, are you?
Barely. I'll be glad when Monday or Tuesday rolls around and starts warming up.
Oh, so you're in East Tennessee, brother, now, are you?
Yes, I am. Moved down from Michigan. I'm in East Tennessee now, and our cold is probably nothing compared to yours, but I mean, 6 degrees or -3 last night. It really hurts the Tennessee blood.
Oh, anyway, I mean, it's all relative. We had -46, which whatever, that's, that was friggin' cold. But
see what I mean?
we have insulated, everything's insulated. It's not like we've got land, 3-4 hours from where you are. And I'm on some of the Facebook pages, and the stuff you guys are dealing with is unreal. So you're a trooper. But
we're just not prepared for it. I mean, our snowplow in Michigan, I mean, the blades on them were like 8 foot tall. Down here, it's a pickup truck with a store-bought snow blade. So it just doesn't compare. I'm used to driving in the snow, but people around here are not. So it's a little hairy sometimes.
And what kind of tires you got on there? Just summers, or do you run all seasons, or
just summer? That's all we usually have.
All right, brother. We had a conversation at prepper camp, had a great time. And
yes,
it was short. It was brief. And so I wanted to bring you on here, and I wanted everybody to kind of hear a little bit about who you are. So start way back when it was Little J, and tell us where you came from. Fill us in on your story, brother.
Well, mid-Michigan, grew up there, was a little bit of a delinquent at one point, and then my mother passed away, and my father kicked all the brothers out. My sister was already out of the house. So moved to Chicago where my sister was living, and got in a lot more trouble there. And I had 21 warrants out for my arrest. 17 in Illinois, 3 in Michigan. No, sorry, 17 in Michigan, 3 in Illinois, 1 in Indiana. I got pulled over one night, and the cop was really nice and threw me in jail. Next morning, I went in front of the judge, and he gave me an option. I could go to Cook County Jail, or I could talk to one of the 3 men in the back. And that was when, military used to go to the courts all the time. And I'd already been talking to the military with a buddy of mine for quite a while, just didn't sign up. And I signed up that day, and I was off to Fort Knox. Well, actually, I was off to another place. And then I flunked out of special ops because I wouldn't jump out of a perfectly good airplane for some reason. Yeah. And so they put me in tanks at Fort Knox, and then I went overseas and spent the rest of my time overseas and got out. And then I've always been into martial arts, always been into learning as much as I can, and then just done a little bit of everything after the military.
You guys will learn pretty quick that Jay likes to gloss over He's like, I was into martial arts. We'll get to that, I promise, guys, and you'll appreciate it. So at one time, I went back and listened to the chat we had. You were a test car driver for AMC, is that right? Way back when?
Yep, way back when. It was at Michigan International Speedway. My mother was actually the first test car driver in the family, and then my oldest brother, he got signed on, and then once I got 16, I was really interested in it, so I just went and signed up, and we would test drive AMC cars, which sounds really interesting, but it was more like you're driving 70 miles an hour around a 2-mile track for 8 hours. It's not a lot of fun. Or you get the stop and go like city traffic, and you would speed up to 35, then slow down to stop. And then you go to 25 and stop, and then up to 30 and stop, and then 25 and stop. So you're emulating going through a city so that they could get their miles per gallon. And so it wasn't a lot of fun. Every once in a while, Mr. Penske, he'd come out there and, he grabbed me or a couple other guys that he liked. We would go out before MIS is now a huge parking lot. They would, there was a test course out back that was nothing but curves and hills, and he would just fly across them things, and we would have a blast. And then, growing up at the racetrack during the race season, you get to pull security. So I got to know all the race car drivers back in the day, hanging out with Rusty Wallace, Kyle Petty, and all these people. And it was just a lot of fun. They were like a second family at that point.
Man, who was the coolest? Who did you enjoy the most at all those drivers?
Kyle Petty, because he introduced me to Grizzly Adams.
Really?
Yeah. I was walking by and I kind of looked in Kyle's truck, and I'm like, what the heck I'm like, that guy looks really familiar. And I kind of walked up, and then Kyle Petty was walking towards me, or Mr. Petty. I used to call him Mr. Petty all the time, but he come up and he's like, who's sitting in my driver's seat? I'm like, no, he looks familiar. And I'm like, I think I was maybe 10 or 11 at the time, because my mom was hanging out there all the time or doing all that stuff. This was before I was a test car driver. And I was like, he looks familiar. Here he comes walking over. And as soon as the guy spoke, I was like, oh, Grizzly Adams. Oh, it was like and that was probably the only time I was really ever starstruck, because it was just like, wow. And he's like, calm down, son, calm down. I'm just a man. I'm just me. And I was like, that's really cool. And that just kind of stuck with me with, meeting all these different people. I've met a lot of celebrities, and it's usually just walking down the street or something, because I'm always watching people, and they're always just real down to earth. There's been a couple of jerks, but it's like, no matter who you are, you don't need to be pompous. You are who you are, and you just go hang out and do your thing. And, that's what everybody does. So it really irritates me when I see people just be so pompous about stuff. And it's like, I hate those people.
So you're in the military for a bit, and then you went into, was it postal service after that? I can't quite remember.
Yeah. Well, I did many jobs, but eventually landed at the post office and did 25 years there, and then got out when I screwed up my back. So been recovering from that ever since.
How'd you go from military to the post office? Because it wasn't just the post office, but you were working on, was it the Cherokee Reservation at one time, or did I get that wrong?
No, I got hired in at a small office, and then bouncing around the different offices. I finally got up to Lansing, Michigan, and did pretty much every job there. I worked on the Postal Rate Commission at one point, where, we go out, we test letters and all that, and then we send that information, and they determine by how much gas that they use and manpower and all that. And then the prices, stamps will either go up or stay at the same level, and they have to go to Congress to get that changed. So I was part of that team. And then when I transferred down to South, because we wanted to move, and I've made a lot of people mad, and I have a deep voice, and I will stand for what I believe is right. And so it was, I was a supervisor for a while, but I was also a union steward for the clerks. I was a union steward for the mail handlers. So I made a lot of people mad on both sides of the spectrum. So when I was trying to transfer, it took me 5 years with 81 denials in 10 different states. Finally, I went to the postmaster. I said, if you really didn't like me, you get rid of me. He goes, no, we like you. I'm like, no, I know you hate me. Why punish yourself by punishing me to stay here when you could just get rid of me and you wouldn't have to deal with me anymore? And within 2 weeks, I was down in Bryson City, North Carolina. So that worked for me. But then Bryson City didn't want me because somebody called down there and warned them about me. So I'm like, dude, I'm coming down tomorrow. I expect to start working on Saturday. He goes, you ain't working here. So called around the different offices and found Cherokee, North Carolina. And they're like, we would love to have you. I'm like, you heard about my reputation, right? He goes, I don't care. He goes, we need somebody. I don't care how bad you are. I'm like, okay. So I went in there and absolutely loved it. John Bradley was my postmaster. Barbara Twinita was my clerk along with me. And then the Smoker brothers were carriers, all Cherokee people, all beautiful people, just gorgeous souls. They were just great people.
And then how long were you there?
I think 2.5 years. My family was still in Michigan. I finally got to move down to Tennessee. I was still working over there 6 days a week, coming home maybe a day and a half, and then have to go back over there and work. And then eventually I transferred to Knoxville. I was there for about 3-4 years maybe. And then I got hurt and then they booted me out.
And so is that when you get into inspecting beehives and that sort of thing, or was there anything in between there?
No, there's always stuff in between.
Dude, I love the in-between. The in-between is what gives it color, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I was a beekeeper up in Michigan, and when we moved down, I had to bring my bees down. You know, they're my girls, so I brought them down. And I was a beekeeper down here, and I started speaking at some of the clubs and talking about bees. And the state apiarist became a friend, and Mike came out the one day, and I was holding the honey convention. And excuse me, it's just a beekeeping convention for all beekeepers or people wanting to become beekeepers. So I was there running that, and Mike came up to me during a break, and he goes, I need somebody to work for me. I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, well, I cover the whole state. I hired one guy on the west side. I need somebody on the east side. I was like, well, you already hired somebody. He goes, yeah, but he just quit on me. So I was like, well, I guess. And my buddy's standing there. He goes, I'll do it. And Mike's not even paying attention to him. He goes, I need somebody. I'm like, well, I don't really want to work. I'm retired. I don't want to work. He goes, well, it's not really like work. You just go out and talk to beekeepers. I'm like, well, I would like that. So I hired on, worked for them for 8 years, doing part-time jobs and going around educating people was part of the job too. So I really like that. And then as the government is the government, they just decided to restructure everything, and I lost that position.
So at some point, and I don't remember where you told me this before, but I know you hurt your back, but at some point you were slightly into martial arts too, weren't you?
Yeah. Remember the show Chips?
Oh, I sure do. I called it bike chips when I was a kid, but yeah, I do.
Well, Ponch and John, they ended up running it up against Ninja. And I was like, what the heck is this? And I didn't have any idea. So I went on, the next school day, I went in there and I'm talking to my buddies. I'm like, so did you see Chips? And they're like, yeah. And, what was with that guy being a ninja? And I don't know. So we went to the library because there was no internet. You couldn't look up anything. So we're like trying to figure out stuff. Librarian comes over and she pointed us in the right direction. So then I pulled out a book, and it was a Jeet Kune Do from Bruce Lee. So I started reading that and, trying to do the little things in there. And then my dad saw me. He goes, hey, we met that guy. I'm like, met who? He goes, Bruce Lee. I'm like, when? He goes, oh, you were just a little kid. And I was like, okay, I have no recollection of, this meeting ever, but we went apparently when we were traveling. My dad went to his friend dragged us along, said, this guy's really cool. And we watched the demonstration. I wish I could remember it. I really do. But that just kind of speared me into, okay, so I know somebody that does some of this stuff. And then I started learning more of that. I found out there was Taekwondo at the school. That was back in 1979. And then everywhere I go, I always try to find a new type of martial arts, learn from them. If they're good, if they're not, then I just kind of leave them alone, walk away. But if they're good enough, I want to go learn from them, because not every teacher is a good student, and not every student is a good teacher.
So over the years, you tried your hand at a few different martial arts. Which ones? I mean, I want to say which one's your favorite, but what's the best all around one of the bunch, or where do you land on them?
I really like the internal martial arts, like Kung Fu, Tai Chi, Qui-Gon, Chin Na, and it's the internal martial arts is much easier for you and your body, because you're using your opponent's movements and weight against themselves. The ground can hit them much harder than I can. So it's just much easier than like karate and taekwondo. It's a hard block, and if somebody's punching you, you're supposed to block it out of your way really hard. And it's like, well, eventually, as any fight, you're going to get hurt. So as you get into fighting, you're going to get hurt, no matter if you win or lose. So why not make it easier on yourself and do something with the internal martial arts, where you can just, use their own weight against them, or their own pain against them, to control them. So I really like the locking movements of Chin Na and Tai Chi. Basically, Tai Chi is just slow moving Kung Fu, and Kung Fu covers everything. It's not like one style is Kung Fu. There's many different types of Kung Fu. Kung Fu is just martial arts in general.
Did not know that. So I think it was just a couple of days ago. It was the 30th anniversary of the first UFC pay-per-view, I think, or pretty darn close. So in the 90s there, considering you were into a bunch of different martial arts, did you ever dabble into the mixed martial arts at all?
Oh, yeah.
How'd that go?
It was doing pretty good. I was going to go speak with Dana White and the team over at the UFC to maybe get into it, but I got in a really bad motorcycle accident like the week before, so I just didn't get to go. But I ended up training cage fighters and having fun with that, and it was a lot of fun.
What are some of the more interesting dudes that you trained with over the years, either be it martial arts or MMA, that sort of thing?
Boss Rutan is a beast. I love that guy. Yeah, he's cool. Randy Couture, great guy. Loved working with him. And Matt Hughes. Those are like the top three guys. I mean, there's other people, but those were like the top three guys. I still haven't met Chuck Norris. I really want to meet him. Oh. That's the one guy that, he was the badass back in the day. I really want to meet him.
He's still doing good. He's still kicking and doing good. I think he has a farm or a ranch now or whatever. Yep. But I love Boss. Is it Boss Rutan? I don't know. Yep. Rutan. Yeah. I love watching the old videos. The highlight. Yeah. The dude could take your head right off. There's no getting around it.
Yeah.
So didn't you, and I hope I don't have this, my brain isn't always as good as normal, but didn't you kind of make your own martial art at one time, or do I have that? Yeah. So what was that, and where did that come about?
Every martial arts has similarities, and so I just took the best of pretty much all of them and used some of the same names. Some of the, all the techniques have just little variations. I found the variations that really work for me. I was in 1,089 street fights. I was in 512 competitions. I was in 32 cage fights. And so I just took all that information and wrapped it up and put it all in one system called Grand Chi. And that's what I got inducted in the Hall of Fame for.
You just kind of brush over that, of course. But yeah, so this is the World's Martial Arts Hall of Fame. Is that, or what do they call it?
Well, there's different martial arts Hall of Fame, but I'm in the United States Martial Arts Hall of Fame. Okay. Along with Bill Superfoot Wallace, which is another cool guy. I don't know if you remember him.
Just in passing, so when you say over 1,000 street fights, what entails a street fight? What does that mean?
Bar brawl, fighting in the street, fighting in the alleys, fighting anywhere, in a gas station or whatever. I was a bouncer for a while, so I just kind of slid all those fights into that street fighting area. I was a bouncer in Chicago for a while, so
that's crazy. So you're like, yeah, test car driver, and then into the military, and then along the way you become a fairly well-renowned martial artist. Then you go around and start inspecting beehives, and then one day you retire from that, so sort of, and Hollywood comes knocking, right? Well, I can't make it up. People are gonna be like, he's just making this shit. I'm not. It's true, dude. Yeah.
Well, actually, the honeybees got me into acting. I was doing a inspection on the west side of Knoxville, and I got done with that. And I had another one over on the east side of Knoxville. So I was just driving through town. I was like, oh, I'm getting low on gas. I'll grab some gas. Plus, I'm a little bit early, and I hate being too early, and I really hate being late.
Oh, yeah.
But I pulled into a gas station. As I'm pumping the gas, I looked over and I see what I thought was like a crime scene, because there was a car or a police car there, and there was a camera crew. And I'm thinking, that's strange that a camera crew's there when the police are there. Usually they're not there all the time. I was like, well, okay. So I'm just kind of watching, get done paying, or I went inside, pay for my gas and grab something to drink. I come walking out. I see the guy climbing up on the overhead, and I'm like, oh, he's getting the shot down. I'm like, oh, that's like a TV or movie set. I'm like, so I just kind of being nosy, just stood there by my car watching. One of the grips comes walking by and joking around. I'm like, hey, man, how do I get in on this? And he goes, oh, go talk to her. I'm like, are you serious? He goes, yeah, we're always looking for people. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. I'm like, okay. So I go over there, and I didn't realize she was the director. And I was just kind of waiting until they said cut. And as soon as they said cut, she kind of looks at me and she goes, can I help you? And I'm like, yeah, the one guy said to talk to you about, how do we get in on this? She goes, oh, go to Jupiter Entertainment on Facebook and just apply for anything that looks or sounds like you. I'm like, okay. Like that easy? She goes, yeah. I'm like, okay. So I went off to my bee inspection, didn't think about it. And this is like probably around June. It was a little after Christmas, before New Year's, all the families together. I'm sitting there and I pull up the laptop. I'm dinking around on Facebook, and I'm like, oh yeah, Jupiter Entertainment. And I pulled up, and there's a guy with glasses, looks like me, was in the military like me, computer programmer like me. And I'm like, this is me. So I just took a quick picture of me and sent it off, and they came back like the next day and they said, we'd like to book you for the show. And I'm like, really? I'm like, that damn easy? And then when I go in there, the director, I'm sitting in holding with all these other actors, and I'm like, oh man, I don't know what the heck. They're all like talking, and they all know each other, and I'm just the introvert in me, and I'm just sitting there in the corner, looking around like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I can do this. And the director comes in there. He goes, all right, I need you, you, and you. I'm like, okay. So I get up and I go walking over, and he goes, all right. He's explaining the scene, and Bobby is just a great person, and he's explaining the whole scene, what's going on. And the first thing he mentions is, I'm going to be up on stage and I'm going to be singing. I'm like, whoa. Nobody said anything about singing. And he goes, is that a problem? I'm like, dude, I can't sing. He goes, you got a great voice. I'm like, I have a great voice, but I cannot hear it. I'm damn near deaf, so I can't hold a tune. And he's like, oh, this whole show is just all recreation. So it's all in the background and there's no sound up. He goes, we'll play whatever song you like, so you can look like you're rocking to it. And, it doesn't say anywhere in the notes what songs he was singing or anything. I'm like, okay. So they put on AC/DC, and I saw Black and Back, or Back in Black. And I just, winged it. And then he just told me everything to do. And I just, being prior military and martial arts, I know how to follow instructions and orders. And so I just did everything that they were telling me to do. Came, after 3 days of shooting, he come up there and he goes, all right, make sure you reapply, because we really need people like you back. I'm like, really? He goes, oh yeah, you did great. I'm like, okay, I was a little nervous. He goes, I couldn't tell, you did awesome. I'm like, all right. And that was the Snapped season 26, I think episode 5 or 9. That was the first one. And I've been in every season of Snapped since, and there's been 8 more seasons. So I like doing that show. It's true crime. It's basically, Snapped is women that just lose their gourd and kill their husbands or kill their loved ones.
So how many times have you been killed on screen then?
Only about 4 times.
Okay.
And, usually I play a detective, I think it's that military stance where you stand up straight and everything. And if I cut my hair, I look like a detective all the time. So I play a detective a lot.
So how many shows have you been in so far?
It's over 100, probably 120 or so.
Any movies at all?
Done a few short movies. We're actually filming another short movie this Saturday or next Saturday. And then I got a commercial coming up in Nashville in another week or two, once my beard kind of grows out here. And then I did, Romance in the Great Smoky Mountains. It was a Hallmark movie, but very small part, no speaking lines or anything. So I'm still on that bottom edge of the acting. I'm still trying to work my way up there.
But you're doing it, which is cool. I think that's incredible. So, are you in the Screen Actors Guild yet, or no? Or does that not work that way with these?
No. Because if I do that, then I can't do all these non-union jobs that are really close by. Because I'm only about an hour from Knoxville, so I get a lot of those jobs really easy. And I'm sitting there talking to other actors, and they're like, "Man, I finally got a job. It's been like 6 months." I'm like, 6 months? I'm like, is that normal? They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, how often do you get a job? And they're like, usually about every 3 to 4 months. And I'm like, oh, okay. And they're like, well, how often do you get them? I'm like, about every 2 to 3 weeks. And they're like, what? And they're like, who's your agent? I'm like, I don't have an agent. And I think that's the problem, is they're always waiting on their agent to show them or to find them a job. And I'm like, no, I'm hungry. I want the jobs. I'm going to find them.
That's cool. I had a guy on not too long ago around Halloween that does short films. He's up in the Michigan area, but he comes down Tennessee area quite a bit. It might be somebody you guys should chat with each other. Yeah. That would be, I love making connections.
That'd be awesome.
So I don't know if I ever asked you this, and you don't have to say. I'm just curious, these kind of background roles, like what kind of day pay do they kind of pay?
Crap.
Yeah, I kind of figured, but
well, I won't go to Knoxville unless it pays me $100 or more. I don't go to Atlanta for $300 or more because I hate the traffic.
Yep.
Nashville, I'll do $200 because my daughter lives about an hour north of there, so I can go to Nashville and then go up there and hang out with her. So it kind of depends on where it's at, or if it's a friend. Like next weekend, Matt, I did a show with him, Storms of Suspicion, a few years ago, and I didn't think I made an impression on him because he was just quiet and he was just kind of watching things. And then I realized later when he called me up and said, hey, I need you for a part. I'm like, okay, that's what part? And he explained it. I'm like, I can do that. And I realized a lot of these actors that are also directors and writers, they're sitting there watching everybody else act and going, I need that person. I need that person. And they're storing it away. So now I've been doing that. And now I've been helping, like there's a new movie, as soon as it gets funding, Protecting Grace. All them punches to the head. Every once in a while, I can't speak. Protecting Grace. And as soon as they get funding, it's basically a movie about human trafficking. So it was somebody that was on a music video with me, and he was there just in case I didn't show up. He was going to get to play my part, but he was just sitting there watching me. He goes, dude, I got a part for you. He goes, I want you in this movie. I'm like, all right. And he cast me on, I didn't even have to audition for it. I was like, okay, that's cool. So it's people like that sometimes you really connect with, and they just cast you in their films. So those, for the friends, I'll usually do them a little cheaper or free. Sure. I used to never do anything for free because it's not worth it. But now I'm starting to realize I got to get more speaking roles. I got to get more out there and get my name known, because that's how you get bigger roles. And
I went through your Instagram earlier today, and I saw there was a picture of you with a collar on. And then I remember I was like, oh, that must be a role. And then I'm like, dude, no, you're also a reverend somehow as well, aren't you?
Yes.
How did that come about? That's
well, my dad was a preacher, and my son-in-law is actually in charge, or he's the I'm not sure, he's Baptist, whatever they call Baptist. Is it father? Or
Reverend, pastor.
Reverend,
Yeah.
pastor. There you go, pastor. He's a pastor over at Annie-Hawk in Kentucky. And so, I've always been into spirituality, and, martial arts got me that way. And and my parents were, very churchgoers and everything else. So I was always kind of on that verge of looking at different religions and how they all kind of interconnect, or they don't connect, but they all have the same true values behind them. Don't kill, don't steal, don't, do. So I was looking at it one time and I was like, well, how do I become a reverend? So I started digging into it and just did it. It's like some people want those certificates on the wall. I don't care about the certificate. I care about the knowledge. I want the knowledge. I want to gain as much as I can, because you only go through life once.
When we first met and we first started chatting before, I learned this term quite a few years ago from Jack Spirko on the Survival Podcast, and the concept of a modern Renaissance man. Mm-hmm. And since the role of the most interesting man in the world's already been taken, I think you fit the bill of modern Renaissance man for sure. Yeah,
somebody else called me that the one time, and I was like, I'm a what? He goes, you're a Renaissance man. I'm like, I don't even know what the hell that means. So I had to look it up, because the first thing that popped in my head was Danny DeVito in the movie. And I was like, what? I'm like, what the hell world? And then I started looking it up. I'm like, oh, okay. I guess I kind of fit that bill. And then more people started calling me that. And it's one of those things, is like, once you see one sign, you start seeing a lot of signs. So now I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess I am a Renaissance man.
My wife claims that most people who might have a touch of ADD, at least the need to always be moving on to the next thing. And I don't know. I love it. I think there's something, if you're not learning, what are you doing? Like you said, you only get one kick at this can. And if you're not doing it, why are you bothering, right?
Exactly.
So let's jump into bumblebees, honeybees or whatever. And also we'll touch on some prepping and stuff too, but you've been with bees for a long time, and you kind of went up and down as far as how many were into them, but how did that start? I don't know if I ever asked you how you get into bees.
My buddy at work, when I was working in Lansing, Michigan for the post office, and he just came in one day and he's like, Jay. I'm like, what? And he's like, we're going to be beekeepers. I'm like, no, we're not. And I turned around and I started walking away from him. He goes, no. I'm like, that's correct. No. We're not going to be beekeepers. And I walked away from him. And since, I'm strapped to a machine working all the mail, and he's a mechanic and he just gets to go wherever he wants, he would always come over whenever he has a spare moment. He's like, no, really, we're going to be beekeepers. I'm like, no, we're not. You might be, but I'm not. And he's like, why don't you want to be a beekeeper? I'm like, dude, the whole reason I hate summer is all the stinging insects. And he goes, no, this is different. And then he started explaining to me, bees only sting to defend themselves or their hive. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And he bugged me all day. At lunchtime, he came up and he puts a book on the table and he slides it towards me. I kind of look at it and it says beekeeping. I slid it back to him. And he goes, you love learning, just read it. And he slides it towards me. And I'm like, well, it was kind of in between books. I'm like, all right. So I picked it up and started reading it. And then at, the overtime break, I read it again. I'm like, okay. Went home, read it. In the morning, I read it a little bit, went out to the workshop, started building my beehive. And I come back in after my 2 off days and I'm like, hey, Timmy, I said, when are the bees coming? He goes, oh, they're coming this Friday. I'm like, this Friday? I'm like, wait. No, not this Friday. I need more time. He's like, no, they're coming, no matter if you like it or not. I'm like, okay, well, I got my hive built. You got yours built? And he goes, oh, no. I'm like, what do you mean no? I forgot to do that. So,
that's exactly like a true, first time homestead or anything. Let's get chickens and we'll worry about a coop later on,
Yeah. Well, they're small. You have time to build that coop. And then the next thing you know, chickens are ready to go outside because they're smelling up the house and they're done with the heat lamp. And you're like, oh, well, now I got to build a chicken coop real quick. That's this weekend's project.
So where did bees take you after that?
Bees, I just basically had them for the homestead because the whole thing he was talking about was, he goes, well, you prep anyways. I'm like, I wouldn't really call it prepping. I know I was in the military, and most guys start prepping afterwards, but I'm a farmer. Everything comes in the garden. You got to get it put up right away. So it was, he just explained that honey never goes old. So, they found honey in the pyramids over 3,000 years old. It's still good. Wouldn't you like to really taste that honey? Because honey for every year, even if your bees never move, every year that honey tastes slightly different. And it's because of the different rain season, the different dry season that's coming through, the different flowers that will bloom. One year may be a really good locust year. Another year is really good for the clover. So that honey tastes a little bit different every year. I really want to taste 3,000-year-old honey. I really, really want to. So if anybody out there has connections, hook me up.
My wife gives me grief. 100% that would I heard about a lady just the other day that found 57-year-old wedding cake in the bottom of her freezer. She'd saved it for her 50th wedding anniversary, and her husband passed away. They'd forgot about it anyway. Yeah. But so I'd be all over that, man. We found cookies, year-old, 2-year-old cookies. I've always tried it, so sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
What other kind of sundry things like or pollen or beeswax or anything? Have you ever gotten into that?
I never really got into making pollen for people because I just can't find a market for it. So I just let the bees deal with it. The honey up in Michigan, it was, you could sell a jar every once in a while. And I had like 5-gallon buckets of honey because we switched from using sugar to cooking with honey and doing everything with honey. But there was still just too much. I come down here to the South and I go into work one day and I'm the new guy in Knoxville. And one of the guys is talking to me. He goes, "Well, what do you do for fun?" And I'm like, "Well, I like my bees. I go out there and it kind of de-stresses me." He's like, "You're a beekeeper?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "You got honey?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, bring me a couple jars." I'm like, "Okay." And then by the time I walked out of the building, I already had a order for like 25 to 35 jars of honey. I'm like, so I threw, I think 6 cases of honey in my car the next day, and I come down and I sold out. So I came back home and threw a bunch more jars in my car. And every day I come in and I sold out all my honey. And I'm like, okay, there's a different cultural awareness down here towards honey than there is up north.
That is cool. So do you still, are you still selling, or have you kind of pared back over the years with bees, or what are you doing with them now?
I am about 10 years behind on honey production. So I've got sales out for 10 years. My honey is good. But then again, I always tell people, if you're a beekeeper, I ask them, who's got the best honey? And you should answer, I have the best honey, because you always do. In the store-bought stuff, stay away from the store-bought stuff, people. Whoever's listening to this, just stay away from it. Unless you know your beekeeper, you don't know if it's 100% honey or not. And a lot of the honey that's coming into the stores is corn syrup, and it's mixed with a little bit of honey, and it's mostly corn syrup. And then sometimes they'll actually buy local pollen, and they go through the filtration system of the honey, pull out all the pollen from either China, Argentina, or really big countries that do that, even Canada. And they will filter out all that pollen, and then they buy local pollen and they will inject it into the honey so that when it's tested, it sounds like it tests as local honey.
Wow.
Yeah. Adulterated honey is a big thing.
I watched an entire show, or maybe it was a YouTube video, I can't remember, but there was a whole bunch of countries that were banned from importing honey to the U.S. and Canada. And so what they were doing was they were shipping it to countries that could import it. And they were playing like, the hot potato or whatever game.
Yeah, the shell game.
Yeah, the shell, that's it. Yeah. And I had no idea. And here, Bee Blessed Farms just said Instacart has the honey that is under state investigation.
Oh boy. Yeah, it's crazy. And there's a guy here in East Tennessee, and he's been in trouble several times, but he always gets a little bit better the next time, so they can't catch him on the same thing twice. He has about 30 colonies. I think 32 was the one time I drove by and saw 32 colonies, but he supplies honey to East Tennessee, Middle Tennessee, part of West Tennessee, South Kentucky, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. And I'm like, how do you get this much honey? Each hive only makes about 80 to 200 pounds of honey, so how are you selling all this? Well, he buys all this honey from Asia, brings it in there, and then he's buying all this local pollen from everybody. And that's how he keeps those certain ones there. So when they come inspect, he just shows them those jars of the local honey. And he got in trouble because, his jars say East Tennessee Mountain Honey. And he's like, no, that's just the name of the company. That's not saying that it's local. I'm like, that's a gray line, man. But he gets away with it.
It was like the old rumor of McDonald's when they said they had a company called 100% Pure Beef. But anyway, whatever. But so what are, when people want to get into doing bees, what are some of the mistakes that folks make? What are the things, the dumbest mistakes you've seen them make?
Education is the biggest one, because everybody thinks, I can just put 2 hives out there. Well, pre-1982, you could just put bees out there and they would be perfectly fine. But through importing and exporting, we got in small hive beetles, and we got in varroa mites in 82 and 84. And that really messed up bees. Now, hive beetles, as long as you have a nice strong hive, you ain't got to worry about hive beetles. But varroa mites, they actually attach to the bee and they suck out the fat. And when they're digesting the fat with the enzyme goes into the bee to break down the fat, and the diseases go into the bee. So now the bee is getting sick, and we know of at least 24 different diseases that the bee will get from the varroa mites. And these things will multiply very quickly because their life cycle's close to the bees. So they actually use the larva of the bee and, actually the pupa of the bee. And then when they come out, there's, mom comes out with like 2 to 4 of her daughters. So you can get a mite bomb is what a lot of beekeepers call them.
Oh, is that different than colony collapse disorder?
Colony collapse disorder, I think it's a multitude of different things because they've never really pinpointed exactly what's going on. And, at one point they were calling colony collapse disorder was when the bees all just died. And then they said, no, it's when they abscond, when they left. And it's like, well, which is it? And then it's just, I've never had to treat my bees. I've been lucky. I've never had to put chemicals in my bees. I do treatments where I split my bees. I manage the varroa mites through different practices, but I've never had to put chemicals in my hives. And so the one year I was like, well, I don't have mites. Maybe I'm not doing the check correctly. So I sent off 1,095 honeybees to the bee lab, and I can't even remember where's that, but I sent them off to the bee lab, and there's live bees, dead bees, and then a portion of wax from 8 different hives is what you take it. So I sent it off. I get this report back, and they said I have 1.5 mites. I'm like, awesome, because if you get 3 per 300, you're supposed to treat with chemicals. I'm like, well, I got 1 per 1,000. I'm like, I'm doing great. So I don't have to treat. I've been lucky like that. And I think it's through my practices. But the chemical makeup of the wax, because wax is very porous. It's like a big sponge.
Sure.
And I had 37 chemicals in my hives. And I'm like, how do I get 37 chemicals? I mean, my girls are going everywhere. They're picking up anything and everything. Everybody that sprays Roundup in their garden, is using 7-Dust, which will kill bees. But all these other chemicals that the farmers are spraying and all this. And, I've moved my bees from Michigan down to here, and I had some of the same wax in there. And, we always tell people, and I even tell people when I go speak, rotate your wax out at least every 3 to 5 years. Get rid of that old wax. And here I am. I got frames of mine that are probably 25 years old. But I don't have a problem with disease, and I don't have a problem with varroa. So that's why I usually don't really rotate them out.
So do you, you're kind of getting into the chemical end of things. Are you saying that might be what's causing colony collapse, or is that what they suspect it to be?
I would say so, and I've heard a couple different professors say it because it's like a bug bomb. If the bees will fly over certain vegetation to get to a different one because they need a certain, like every flower doesn't have the same pollen makeup, doesn't have the same nectar. Each pollen has a certain amount of this or that or whatever. And so sometimes the colony needs a slight boost of something else. So they will actually fly over a certain floral to get to a different one, and then they bring it back. Well, even your bees, when they go out, they tell each other through a honey dance where the nectar source or pollen source is. And sometimes you'll see your bees go, one hive's all going out to the left. You'll look at the next hive and it's all going out to the right. And then you look at the next one, they're kind of going every which way. And it's like, okay, so that one that's going every which way, they're picking up from field A and field B, and farmer A sprayed, whatever, and farmer B sprayed something different. Well, when it comes back, now those two chemicals react inside the hive because they're bringing those chemicals back, and it creates like a bug bomb, or at least something that they don't want in that hive. And when it gets too much, the only way they can deal with it is to abscond, to leave. So that's part of that colony collapse disorder. And there will be dead bees at the bottom because they will wait until they're like, no, let's try to figure this out. And they're trying to keep their hive going. Some of the bees are dying, and there's only so many bees that will take out the dead bees. It's, it creates so much work for them. And then eventually there's like, all right, we give, they take off.
Wow. So does that have bad consequences? Obviously it does, but how serious of an issue could that be long-term, do you think?
Well, if you don't realize what's going on, and I tell people that, whenever their bees abscond, there's a reason they leave a perfectly good home, especially when you walk in or you open it up and you're looking and you're like, okay, there's plenty of food sources in here. So why would your bees, and I relate it to people, if your wife has the kids in the house, you're in the house, there's plenty of food, and you have a good house, it's airtight, why would you leave? Why would you leave a perfectly good house? There's something wrong there. So if your bees just leave, then you go ahead, and I would scrape all the wax out of all the frames, and I would hit the frames and the inside of the box with a torch. It's not going to kill American foul brood, but that's a whole different thing. You can definitely tell if it has American foul brood. They will die in place. But absconding, they take off. You can bleach it and then hit it with a torch and burn out any kind of disease that might be in there, hopefully, with the bleach and the torching. And then put new bees in it. And also, they will mix and match boxes. Everybody does it with beekeeping. But if your bees abscond from one of the boxes, keep an idea of what those boxes are. Number them or put color tape on just those boxes so that next year you're sticking that one box with bees in there. If they're doing good, then you find that same box that was on it from last year, put that on there and keep going like that. And eventually you might find one of the boxes just like stops them in their tracks. They won't expand in population. They just kind of stop. But if they keep expanding, great. If they start depopulating, then, okay, there's something wrong with those boxes. Just throw them on the fire and burn them.
Huh. So speaking of boxes and frames and hives, I got a question here from Off-Grid Ping. He's my neighbor down in Tennessee on our property. And he said, is there a particular type of hive that you prefer, or maybe plans on how to build one?
I prefer the Langstroth hive. It's been around since probably the mid-1800s or late 1800s. It works very well here in the United States. It was developed by Reverend Langstroth, and he found out that there's a bee space. If it's more than 3/8 of an inch, they will build it with comb. If it's less than 3/8 of an inch, then they put propolis in there and seal it up and close it. So the Langstroth hive is very good. The top bar hives, they're easier to work, and even the long Langstroth are easier to work on your back. But a long Langstroth is basically just a top bar hive that takes the regular Langstroth frames. It's kind of hard to get the bees going in those. Once you do, they do very well, but they don't make a whole lot of honey. If you're in it for honey, then you want a Langstroth. There's many different ones. There's like the cathedral hives, there's ware hives, there's all these different ones that people are trying to always reinvent the wheel and try to make it better. Honeybees are the most studied insect in the entire world.
Yeah, so it's funny. I was just going to ask you this, and let's bring it up from the right here. So Hunter says, and I'm sure you have an opinion. See, he's shaking his head already, folks. Here we go. I saw another ad for the hive that you twist the handle and fill up your jar, which is really pretty on Instagram, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are, Jay.
All right, that's the Flow Hive, and Cedar and Stuart Anderson are, everybody says they invented it. I know Cedar and Stuart. They used to help. They would give us a flow hive every year for the honey convention when I put it on. And they're nice people, and they will even admit we didn't invent anything. They found an old patent that was, I think it was back in like 1829 or something. It was an old patent. And they just couldn't do injection molding back then. Well, Cedar and Stuart found it, and they're like, oh, well, we can make this now with injection molding, and we can make these frames. And basically, it's, the cells are here, and basically it cracks it. And now the fluid can roll down, and then there's a trough at the bottom, and it rolls out the back and goes into the thing. The only problem is that I've seen, the first problem was my boss called me up, and he goes, anybody with a flow hive, warn them. He goes, quit being a guy, and you get these like long rods to stick in there and then turn them, and you got to break these cells. Well, if you do it too quick, all the gears in there are this real thin wire with plastic gears, and you can hear them go pop, and they're a real pain in the butt to put back together if you can. So it's easier to kind of put it in at a time and turn it, and then put it a little deeper, turn it a little bit deeper. The only thing is, if you don't put it on in the right time of year, when there's a good honey flow, the bees are opportunists. If there's no nectar out there, then they cannot bring it back. They cannot make it into honey. Then they cannot eat the honey and secrete the wax on their abdomen so that their sister can come over and pull off the wax and put it into honeycomb. Did you know that?
I did not.
I could tell by that face. You're like, oh, that's really interesting. So if you're putting all these plastic frames in there that you're supposed to be able to, have all this honey in, they will rob that wax and take it down and put it in the brood chamber, which is basically all the baby bees, because they want to build up the hive. So if you're putting all these fresh wax in there and there's not on a honey flow, then they will rob all that wax off that plastic. And I have yet to see, over 25 years, I have yet to see a bee put honey back on wax. They will put it on wood. They will put it on foundation, plastic foundation that is coated in wax, but they will not put wax on plastic. So now you have a box, 2 boxes. Now it's just one brood chamber, and there's no honey super, and it's $900 that you paid, and it's worthless.
So overpriced and overcomplicated. Is that kind of? Without being, I'm not trying to be mean to the folks who build them. I'm just saying, for somebody who's getting started,
it's the videos were perfectly made for people just getting into beekeeping, because, hey, this is so much easier than buying a expensive extractor. It's you got to do all this other stuff. You have to get in there. You still have to get in and look at your bees when you have a flow hive. The expensive extractor, you're going to get it because you're going to get bit by the bug, and you're going to buy more and more bees. And that next thing you know, you're going to have more and more hives. We always suggest start out with 2 hives, and then I had one gentleman. Now I'm telling everybody start out with 2 of the same style hives, because he had a problem there. But you pay $800 for each hive. You got 2 hives. That's $1,600. I can go buy 2 hives for $400 and put that $1,200 towards a really nice extractor and honey scraper or hot knife, and I'm all good. So, and I can get a whole lot more hives, and I still have that initial money that I already paid on the extractors.
Is it worth trying to build your own hives, or as a beginner? Yeah.
Yes. I would suggest building everything in the hive except for the frames. The frames just have so many cuts. They take forever to do, because you got the top bar, and it's got probably, I think, 10 or 12 different cuts. And then you got the side bars that have 4 different cuts. And then the bottom bar is the easy one. It's only got like 5 cuts, so, and then, it's so much easier to it's $2 a frame, or maybe it's $2.50 a frame. Go buy that. There's 10 of them. You spent $25. The boxes are very easy. There's many different plans. Beesource.com used to have them, or now you can just type into Google and, Langstroth or a beehive plans, and they pop right up. So they're very easy.
So say I was able to talk the missus into having bees, and I was also able to, you know how it is, but I petitioned the town council to allow bees and chickens, which we've talked about for a while, but the old allowed versus able. But either way, so say I was ready to get started, what kind of gear do I need? Any beginner, what would you tell us? Because here's my problem. I'm the type of guy who buys a freeze dryer, then buys extra trays, then buys a chamber vacuum, then, you know what I mean? So I have to stop somewhere. You
have an addiction.
Yeah.
First part is admitting it.
That's right.
The first year I went out there, and all I bought was a veil with a hat. And you can even just buy a veil and put a baseball cap on. But if you buy this safari hat, the plastic ones, and a veil, and then I just took some gloves, I put them on, I put my old Army field jacket on, I duct taped the sleeves closed, tied around the waist to make sure, the bees couldn't get up inside. And, I did that for a couple of years. Then I went out and I bought the full body suit, with a veil. And then I realized when I came down south, that was way too hot to be working in. So now I have a ventilated jacket with a zip-on hood that I can take the hood off, hand wash that, and then I zip up the jacket and I throw it in the washer and I wash that. And I go to these bee inspections. I'm like, these people will wear these old, nasty looking bee suits. They got this huge brown and yellow badge of honor, I call it, on the front of them, because, I've been beekeeping this many years. I'm like, yeah, when I see that, I see disease. If you have all this wax and this pollen on you, it could be disease on you. So therefore, I'm like, when was the last time you washed your jacket? Oh, never. I'm like, well, you need to. Because when I got into American Foul Brood years ago, that stuff freaked me out. It is so easy to transport spores to make other hives sick. So I would do inspections, and if I even thought the hive was kind of bad, I was like, every night I was going back to the hotel and I was throwing my stuff in the washer and washing it. It was just very scary stuff.
So what was that again? Can you, yeah.
There's European Foul Brood, and then there's American Foul Brood. And it doesn't have to do with the continents. It was over in Australia where they were having a really bad foul brood breakout, and they only called it foul brood. Well, it was a European scientist that found that the European foul brood attacks the larva, and then it was American scientists that found out that it was a different bacteria that was affecting the pupa. So that's why they named it those two. But European foul brood, basically, your bees will get it maybe every year, or, if it does that, then just take out all the wax and, let them build new wax. But it's basically when the bees are building up so fast and there's not enough food coming in, the baby larva or the baby bees will be digging around the bottom of the cell and picking up the bacteria and making themselves sick. So if you cage the queen for a few days, in a 4x6 area so she can still walk around, doesn't mess up her laying pattern, then they will bring in enough food. And if you're feeding them, then you can get rid of that European foul brood. American foul brood is transferred by these spores, and there's 37 spores can make a adult bee sick. Well, if it goes to a spore stage, when basically the pupa dies, there could be over 1 million spores in each cell, and there's about 2,000 cells on each side of a frame. So you got 4,000 cells by 10 frames, or 2 deeps. Now you got 80 sides, or, it's just, the numbers just get crazy. But 37 versus 1 cell is 1 million. So you can make a whole hive very sick, and they cannot recover from it. Now there's terramycin that you can put in there, but that's just going to cover up the symptoms. It will keep them healthy. But as soon as you stop treating with terramycin, then they will get sick, and then they will transfer it, because basically what happens is the hive diminishes or depopulates because they just can't stay alive. Other bees are opportunists, so they will actually come over there and they start robbing all the honey. Well, those spores will be in the honey, or as they're walking through, the spores get on them, and now they're taking it back to their hive. And since it only takes 37 to make one of them sick, they can pick up a lot of spores, very quickly and basically kill their hive.
So how do you diagnose it? And then what's the treatment? Like scorched earth, burn it all to the ground, or what do you do?
Different states have different ideas on it. Here in Tennessee, in another state, I won't say which state, but many people hear it when I talk when I'm not being recorded, but they basically say, well, if your bees have American foulbrood, just take the bees and shake it on new equipment. I'm like, well, if they're carrying the spores in their stomach, which is where they're going to carry them, that makes them sick. Now you just shook them onto more equipment to make them sick. And then the spores can hide in the wax or in the wood or, in the pollen. And now you just infected more equipment. Here in Tennessee, Mike, my old boss, what he would do is we have test kits and you test it and you can buy them at like the co-op or farmer's market, or not farmer's market, farmer's store. Mm-hmm. And I think they're like $20. And basically you just scoop out a bunch of bad cells, stick it in a little jar, you shake it for 60 seconds, and then you put it on a little test strip that looks like a COVID strip. And, you get 1 bar, you're fine. If you get 2 bars, now there's a problem. Here in Tennessee, if we got the 2 bars, and, I would always test it again just to make sure, because I don't want to do this to somebody's hive unless I know they have American foulbrood. If they do, basically what I do is I come back, I tape up all the boxes all together, and I leave the opening open for the bees all to come back at night. And then we dig a trench right next to the beehive, or basically a hole. And when all the bees come back, and then I wait another, 10 minutes to make sure no more bees are coming back, I seal up the front, and then I spray ether in there to put them to sleep. And then once they're all asleep, then I open up that box and put them in the hole, and then I basically let all the ether out, and then I light it on fire and burn the bees, the honey, the pollen, the equipment all together. I will burn my gloves. I will burn their gloves if they were touching it. There was one beekeeper, they kept touching the hive. I keep taking their gloves, 3 pairs of gloves. I'm like, they started to come back over. I'm like, stop, stay over there. I don't want to do this again. And so, one time I was using my knife instead of my hive tool, because I will even throw my hive tool in the fire, and then we just bury everything. And I don't want that. I don't want to take a chance on moving those spores to anybody else's.
So it's that serious then, hey?
Yeah, it's bad.
So is it quite often at first? Because when I see hives out in the field, they tend to be in bunches. There's not usually just one by itself. You've usually got 6 or 8 or 10 or however many. So do they tend to pretty quickly move into another hive, or not necessarily?
Well, it's basically when it starts depopulating that the bees cannot guard their hive. And that's when the other stronger hives will go, okay, well, hey, we're going to go take their honey. It's much easier to take their honey than to take nectar, because when they bring back nectar, it has anywhere from like 30 to 90% water in that nectar. And when they bring it back, they put it in a cell, and then they got to fan it, basically heat it up to get all that moisture out. And when it drops below 18% moisture, now it's considered honey. So that's a lot of work versus just going over and beating up on the other girls. You might lose a few of your sisters, but you're going to gain a whole lot more honey. And then you bring that honey back. And if it's got the spores in there, or when you're beating up the other girls, now you got spores on you, and you bring it back, and it's not good.
So it's the difference between shooting your neighbor and stealing his cow, or waiting for him to butcher it himself and then stealing it out of his deep freeze.
Yeah.
So okay, I honestly figured I knew all about the honey making part, not like all of it, but it seemed so. Can you go through it like from start to finish? If you've got time, you want to just kind of explain, because you obviously know. You're the type of dude who knows it deep enough, but can explain it to, a lay person like myself.
So like if anybody's listening right now and they wanted to get into beekeeping, it's January, order your bees now, because by the end of January, pretty much all the bee breeders will be sold out of bees. So order your bees, make all your equipment up throughout the winter. Right. And then the next year, you might want to order more bees because you really like beekeeping, or you're going to expect a loss, and then make more equipment for next year and paint it and get ready. So then in the spring, your bees come in, you install them into the hive, and now you just basically, you can, a lot of people like to feed their bees. I've never fed my bees. I don't like doing that. Bees have been doing this for millions of years. I looked back as far as I could find, multiple resources. As far as I could find was 1948 when they started mentioning about how to feed bees. We didn't do that before that. I think it was after the Civil War, or not Civil War, World War II. And so I'm not great at history. Can you tell?
All right, man.
So anyways, if you have to feed your bees, always feed your bees. Don't lose your bees. I will tell people feed your bees because you took too much honey off. But anyways, back to spring. We want to install them in there in spring because you get that really good spring honey flow coming in. So join a local bee club, find out when the local or the bees are coming and when the honey flow is. They really watch it. Some of these guys know exactly when it's coming. The honey flow is going, they're bringing in nectar, they're bringing in pollen, and they're making bee bread. And so the bee bread is basically the pollen with a little bit of nectar in there. It ferments a little bit, and then that's what they feed the baby bees, along with the honey and royal jelly. And when that bee is ready, after about 9.5, 10 days, it will get capped, that larva. And then they gestate, depending on if it's a worker or a drone, depending on, one's a little bit longer for a drone. And when they come out of the capping, they're an adult bee, and they instantly go to work. And then they work to the end of their life, which in the summer, a worker will last about 30 to 40 days, and then she's dead. And she tries to die outside the hive. But if she dies inside the hive, there's many different jobs. And when they're inside the hive, there will be crypt takers, basically, and they drag the dead out. And they fly it at least 100 yards away, because they don't want a bunch of dead right in front of the hive, because that brings in skunks or whatever, other animals to eat. So they're trying to get it as far away from the hive as possible. So anyways, back to, bees are populating and getting bigger and stronger. The queen's laying anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 eggs a day on average. And that's all her job is, just lay eggs. So then comes, you're waiting for about 8 to 10 frames, 8 out of 10 frames to be full of bees. And when you hit 8 out of 10 frames, then you put another box on. And then when those 8 out of 10 frames get full, then you put another box on. Now you got 2 boxes of brood, and then you start putting on your honey supers. So you want the deeps for your brood, and then you want the mediums or shallows for your honey. Since my back blown out, I've switched all over to nothing but medium boxes, which are a little bit lighter, because a medium box will have about 60 to 45 to 60 pounds of honey on average.
Wow.
Now, if you were stupid, like when I got into it, I didn't read enough, and I put the mediums down below and I put the big heavy deeps up top. I was pulling off 120 pounds with a broken collarbone. I had my elbow strapped to my body with a belt, and nobody else in my family, my kids weren't old enough. My wife wasn't going to help me. So I'm out there trying to take off 120-pound boxes with a broken collarbone. And, that was a whole another story. But so you're building up throughout that time. And like in Michigan, the dearth is only like a week or 2 long. And a dearth is basically a dry period where there's really nothing blooming for the bees to go get. So they're just basically busy housekeeping. They're going out, they're looking around, they're not bringing anything really back, or maybe just barely enough for, just their flights. And then the fall flow kicks in. And in Michigan, it was very good. Here in Tennessee, their dearth is, lately it's been really screwed up, but usually it's about 6 to 8 weeks long. And so a lot of people pull off their honey and not, and then feed them back sugar water, which is nothing but carbohydrates, where honey is a superfood. You could live on honey alone. So what I do is I leave my honey on there, because that's why they make excess honey. It's for the winter, to get them through the winter, but it's also to get them through the dearth. So I leave that good honey on there, so when they come out of the dearth, they have good, healthy bees in their hive. You pull off all the honey and you give them nothing but sugar water. It's like giving your kid cotton candy all weekend long and then expecting him to do good in school, right? He's going to be burned out. He's not going to be ready for school. So I leave that honey on there. That's why they made excess honey. If I want more honey, I just make more bees and more hives. So I actually wait until the spring to pull my honey because it's a marketing thing versus also, I want them to get through the winter. I'll go into that in a second. Most people will pull it off in June here in the South, or, we used to pull off in the fall up in Michigan because you could see how much fall flow was coming in and judge how much honey you could take off and put back on, put the boxes back on there, and they would fill up. The reason I take it off in the spring is around here, everybody's pretty much sold out by January, February. And when I pull it off in spring, I'm the only one selling honey, right? So naturally, I sell out very easily. Now my name's gotten around there. So now I have, plenty of back orders for my honey. So then when you put the honey supers back on or whatever I extracted, now you're getting ready for the winter. And then when winter hits, basically they cluster up around the queen, hopefully around about a basketball size. And the queen's inside, she's still about 96 to 97 degrees in there, even though in Canada, you were mentioning it was minus 30, 46.
Yeah.
But it's minus 46, but the queen inside there is at 95, 90, or 96, 97 degrees inside that cluster. Now that cluster is nice and big. She's just sitting here around the middle, and all these bees, they're shaking their wing muscles to make friction to keep everything warm for her. It's all about the queen. She must live on. The other workers don't care, So when they get too cold on the outside, the other girls will actually push them in, and then the other girls will sacrifice themselves and go on the outside. So it's always in flux of all these bees just moving in and out constantly throughout the winter, and they're slowly moving up, eating honey as they're going up through the hive. Now, there's no drones. Those are the boys because they're worthless, right, guys? You get that at home.
Yes.
Yeah. So the drones, when they will start making drones in spring, and it's basically when they think, okay, this is the breeding season, queen, the hive will split. The old queen leaves with about half the bees, which is basically all the foragers, all the bees that have been outside. All the house bees are still staying there, and they will raise the new queen to take over. So they know this is going on, so they will start making drones, but they won't breed with their own hive. They like to breed with queens that are at least 100 yards away or more to separate that genetics. It's all in them already. They know this. So they go out, and so the queen leaves. You can catch that swarm, which is always fun. Even to this day, catching swarms is amazing. But the drones, if they actually make it through the year without breeding, and because why I say it that way is because when they do breed, they have bigger eyes, they're big guys, and they will fly at the queen, and they will actually ram into her, and that snaps off, and they fall to their death. Yeah, wouldn't that be fun? But if you make it to the fall, then fall's not good for you either, because your sisters will kick you out of the house, and because you don't make honey, you don't do house cleaning, you do nothing but look for a virgin queen. So if you try to come back in there, then they will chew your wings off and kick you out again, so you can't fly back up into the hive. They don't want the boys in there. They're worthless. They're only there to continue the species. Boys, the drones, they cannot sting, so they cannot defend the hive. They don't get honey. Basically, when they wake up in the morning or when the sun comes out, they don't sleep, but they make micro naps, some research says. But in the morning, the bees will go out, and I refer to it like guys. We go out to the bar. We go out to what's called a drone congregation area. It's a high point overlooking a valley or overlooking an area. And because the queen is slightly bigger and she flies slower than the workers, all the drones are just hanging out looking for a virgin queen. If they don't see anything and they get bored, then they go into the nearest hive and they say, hey, feed me, and the girls will feed them. And then they go back up and they hang out with a bunch of guys waiting for that virgin queen. And then if the day's over, they go back in the house. That's all they do. They're just a bunch of drunk guys hanging out at the bar waiting for that that nice looking girl coming in, right? So yeah, I can go on and on. I ramble.
Oh, dude, no, you are great. This is I've probably learned anyway. That's unreal. So, okay. what are the percentage in a hive of workers versus drones when they're born? Like, so do they, I mean, is that in their genetics to know, are they just this many survive, or how does that work?
Well, it depends on the years how many drones will be in there. Like in spring, there will be a lot more drones than in the summer and fall. Then it could be anywhere up to about 60% will be drones in the hive, which is a whole lot, which is way too many. So a lot of beekeepers, when they see drones, I went out to one guy to do an inspection, and the whole time he's sitting there, he's popping heads off of drones. I'm like, dude, can we get through this? He goes, I hate drones. I'm like, they continue the species. And if you have a good queen in there, you want those drones, going after the virgins of your other beehives, because you want that good genetic in the other hives. But so typically you want about 20 to 40% drones in there. You even getting 40% is a lot, because they don't do much. They don't eat a lot, but they do eat honey. They don't bring anything in. The only thing they contribute to is the species.
Wow. So is there only one queen per hive, or are there?
Typically.
Okay. So then you've always got these virgins that the drones are trying to impregnate. So is that next are they doing that to take the place of the queen when she dies? Is that the idea?
Well, it's when basically, it's like if you and your wife, she's the queen and you impregnate her, and then she starts laying way too many kids in the house. And now the house has only got 3 bedrooms, and now you got, 40 kids in there. You need to split, right? So mom's going to take off with the older kids. New kids are going to stay there with the new queen. Basically, in the bee world, the queen will actually lay eggs for the new queens in what's called queen cells, and they're slightly different than the rest of the cells. So she takes off with all the foragers, which is the older bees, and basically they gorge on your honey, and they fill their stomach and their honey stomach full of honey, and then they take off. So that when they get to a new spot, they can start excreting that wax, so that the sisters can start pulling it off and make a new comb in that new area. And now they have started a new house, leaving the old queen at the original house, your original colony, and now the nurse bees are taking care of that queen. And what happens is she usually doesn't lay all the eggs the same day. She'll lay like 3 different days. So that way, when the first couple queens start coming out, they don't fight right away. They will actually go out and do their mating flight. And they do this for about 3 days. And they try to get at least 18 to 20 drones to impregnate them each day. And then, like the slut she is, she goes back in the hive and she doesn't show her face ever again until the next season, when she swarms off and lets the new virgin queens do this. But if the reason she does this 3 different days is so that in case those first ones that hatched and they didn't get bred because it rained too much, okay, now they kind of miss a window. So now the second day, or, when they were out there, instead of finding drones, they found a bird that got snatched up and she got eaten. So there's many different factors that she doesn't come back. And if, eventually they try to lay at least 8, I've seen up to 37 different queen cells in a hive, which is way too many, but 8 to 10 is usually about good. Rambling on. This is so interesting. Sorry.
No, you're great. Really. Yeah. Off Grid Ping says ramble on. This is so interesting. Yeah.
So are those, even if 2 queens come back, they're sisters. Sometimes, it's not very often, but sometimes they'll coexist inside the same hive, and you'll see them on like both sides of the hive building up, and there will be like this empty frame all the way down that nobody really touches, and there's eggs all up in here and larvae, and they're building both sides. Well, eventually one will kill out the other, but usually what happens when they come back, and if there's 2 queens in the hive, they actually do what's called piping, and it's this real high-pitched noise, and when they pipe, it's basically a war cry. All the other bees will stop on the frame, and the only 2 that will be moving are the bred queens, the new fresh, not virgins, but mated queens. And then they will find each other and they will fight to the death. And if both of them die, hopefully that was your first day queens, so that your second and third day queens can go out and get mated and come back and not, kill each other or fight to the death. So if there's only one queen and she's mated, then the workers will go over it and they'll start ripping open. Basically, the cells are on an 11-degree angle in the frames, and that's so the honey can kind of stay in there. But the queen cell comes out and she drops down. So they'll cut a hole in the side of the wax, and then the queen will come over and she'll start stinging the queen that's still in the cell to death. And then she'll go around, she'll do that. And so that way she kills any other future queens that might come out and, challenge her for the crown. So once you get that mated queen in there, she's got her groove on, then she starts laying. A good queen could lay 2,000 to 3,000 eggs a day, and that's almost a full frame on one side. So you can really populate that hive very quickly. So if you're not watching in the spring, that hive can really get ahead of you. So if you're going to get into bees, start with 2 different hives. Always have an extra box ready to go with frames, because you'll realize how quickly they will build up sometimes.
And in those frames, do they make the cells and then she lays an egg in each cell? Is that how that works, or am I?
Yep. So that's another interesting thing is, so the worker bees will determine if it's a worker cell or a drone cell. So a worker cell will be slightly smaller than a drone cell because drones are big fat boys. Kind of like us, right?
Sure. They're healthy. So, they're carrying. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the workers, the queen, when she walks up there, and she will actually measure the entry or the size of the cell, and then she comes up and she drops her abdomen inside the cell, and then she will lay either a worker egg, depending on the size of the cell, or a drone egg because it's a bigger cell, and she can pick and choose which one she wants to do this. So then she just, and there's been, usually when I look for queens, they're easy to spot. They're kind of walking around, but I've had a queen that I could not spot for years. And eventually I saw her because she was just boom, boom, boom. She was dropping eggs. She did not care what I was doing. I didn't have the frame. And the only reason I saw her is because she pulled up and her abdomen is slightly longer than a worker. Her eyes and her thorax is the same size of worker, but her abdomen is longer because of the ovaries and everything else. So that was the only reason I saw her, because she was just going at it. I was like, holy heck, so that was really cool to see her just working that quickly. And she can, because she gets bred with 8 to 20 different drones over 3 days, I've had queens live up to 8 years. It's very rare. And then they're laying a pattern like this big. Usually, you want multiple frames. They lay about 80% of their ability the first year. They lay 100% the second, maybe the third year, and then it drops down to like 60, 40, 20. And then, so the older she is. So that's why a lot of times you'll hear about them killing a queen and putting a new queen in there.
So like chickens as well. They get to the point where they're, Yeah.
So that first year they don't really lay, and then they start laying really well, and then it starts tapering off as they get older.
So say you get, halfway through the season and things are going well, and the queen gets sick or something and she just drops dead. Do they have a contingency plan for that, or no?
Yeah. Because, she usually doesn't die. I mean, I hear all the time that my queen just come up missing. I'm like, you killed your queen, and they're like, no, I didn't. I'm like, how do you know you didn't kill your queen? You have a hive with 50,000 bees in there, and you're pulling boxes apart. You're pulling frames out, and you're putting stuff back together. It's so easy if you pull a frame out too quick, or, if you look in there, pull the frames out that don't have bees on them or very few bees, and then you can pull those out a little bit easier. And, but if you go right into where there's a cluster of bees and you pull that one out, there's a cluster of bees because that's probably where the queen is. And if you pull that frame out, she's a little bit longer, you can actually roll her and damage her, and they will kill her because she's not a good queen anymore, and they will kill her. And those eggs that she just laid, then they'll go over and put them in. They always make like emergency cells, and it's basically so that in case the queen comes up missing, they can grab an egg and they'll move it over there and they'll put it in there, and then they start feeding it royal jelly for its entire life, and that's what makes a queen. Where everybody gets royal jelly in the first 3 days, that's when they're an egg, and then the third day they hatch, and then they feed them a different diet. But if they feed them nothing but royal jelly, that's what makes a queen.
And what is royal jelly?
It's just a better makeup of pollen and honey mixed in, And basically, it's just if you ever taste royal jelly, you pay a lot more for it because it's so hard to extract. But I don't like the taste of it. Some people do, but then again, some people like the taste of, sourwood honey, and I don't, or buckwheat honey. I think it's burnt, but it's all that. Everybody has a different taste. Everybody doesn't like barbecue. Everybody doesn't like bacon.
Really? Is it? You don't like bacon?
No.
Dude, you get along so good until this point. No, okay.
Right? That's what everybody says. I'm like the only guy that doesn't like bacon. But, and that's, I keep wanting to mention this, but we keep talking about something else. So when bees come back and they found a good nectar source, they will come back to the hive and they do what's called a honey dance, right? Now, imagine the room you're in is completely black. You can't see anything. So all you feel is the vibration of your sister telling you where the honey is. And basically what she does a figure 8. And then doing this figure 8, she will shake her tail or her abdomen back and forth. She doesn't have a tail, her abdomen back and forth. Depending on how many times she shakes it back and forth is the distance away from the hive. Now, depending on the angle of did we just lose connection? Okay.
No, you're good.
Depending on the angle of the dance, is in correlation to the sun and the time of day. And that angle will tell the other bees if it's to the east, to the west, to the north, or south, right? So now they know it's a direction. And now they know how far away it is by how many times she did her tail. And you can tell how great of a nectar source she thinks it is by how many times she does it on different spots of the frame. And she's doing this in the dark. So they're just.
Oh, you're doing so good there, Rachel.
Of the wax to tell them how many times it is.
You're okay. I think you're good now, Jay. Yep.
But
figure 8.
When she finds a good nectar source,
you're good.
Connection.
Your
problems.
video froze up just a little bit, but you're doing good. Go ahead. Oh no, everything had been going great on Jay's end the whole time. I don't know about you guys, but I have absolutely been enjoying this entire conversation. This is crazy. This was maybe they got I don't know if they got inclement weather coming in or what happened, but we'll give them a minute here and see what happens on our end here, guys. But yeah, see, Cabot says right here, Interwebs doesn't like him because bacon. I won't hold it against him. I mean, the dude brought his A game with all of this incredible bee knowledge, which is crazy. We might even have to bring Jay back on. And oh my God, I could pick his brain all night, guys. Well, yes. So Hunter wants to know if Jay has a class, lectures, or a book. So yes, he does. He goes around and speaks at a bunch of different events. I'd like to get him at Self-Reliance Festival for sure, but we'll see where we end up with that. But that's not a problem. I think, guys, since we're at about 90 minutes in and Jay seems to have lost his connection just a little bit, I think we'll, oh, wait, hang on. There, maybe. No, he's trying to come back in. There we go. Let's see.
Are we back?
Yeah, we're good. You did great. Hey, I filled in. So I got some questions for you here, Jay.
I must have blew up the internet with all the information overload.
People are loving it. I was just saying.
Wait. One more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when the bees find that nectar source, they bring it back to the cells. Now we're stopped again. My goodness.
No, you're good.
Okay.
No, you're good, Jay.
So
keep going.
You keep blocking up on mine, so I don't know if it's my internet connection or whatever. But so when she finds that nectar source and she tells her sisters where that nectar source is, right? So say it's an apple tree, and they're going out and they're getting that apple nectar, and they're bringing it back. So she only comes inside the hive about 2 to 3 days, and then she regurgitates that to her sister, and then she takes it up because she's a house bee. She takes it up to the cells, to the honey supers, and she puts it in a cell. So that forager goes back, and she's just making a quick run back and forth, bringing in that nectar. So if somebody else comes in and they're working clover, and she goes to regurgitate up to her sister, then she will take it to a different cell. because they will not mix the different nectars in the cells. Just as the pollen, they only put it in an apple cell, and they will only put it in a clover cell, and they will only put the pollens in those cells. They will not mix them. I thought that was very interesting.
Any reason, any genetic or Darwinian reason for that at all?
And they're still studying that. They still don't know why they do that, other than, that's just what they do. So I just thought that was really interesting. Yeah.
That is
right?
cool. I love this. Yeah.
And this is why I'm still on honeybees. Usually I gain enough knowledge and I'm like, okay, I can have a very good conversation, or I can store this knowledge away and use it in the future and move on to the next topic. Honeybees, there's always something to learn. There's always something more to learn. So I'm always going on.
I'm a true believer that anybody, including modern Renaissance men, people jump around. When you're younger, you jump around, and you always do the rest of your life. You always want to learn something. But at some point, I think if a person wants to be great at something or deep into something, you've got to pick your thing. And for you, your literal name is TheBeeManJay, right? So
it's much easier than saying my last name.
Yes, it is. I got about 3 questions here, or 4 maybe, from the audience. You want to bust through them right quick?
Sure.
Okay.
Do it.
All right. Chances of catching a swarm?
Very easy.
What do you do?
If you want to catch a swarm, put your name out there. Let people know on Facebook in the spring that you want to catch a swarm. Show up with a box. I've gone out on swarm calls. One year, I usually have 2 outer covers, and basically it's part of the hive, and I have one on the bottom and one on the top of my box. And then when I show up, I got my box, I have my frames, I have my outer covers, I have a strap to put it around it. So when I show up, I take the frames out, I drop all the bees in there. I have a couple frames in there, so it smells like home. The old wax is really great for them. And then when I drop them in, I got the bottoms covered. I drop them in the box, and I close it just enough so there's about 1 inch open. And that lets me know that I have the queen or not, because if you don't have the queen, they'll go right back to that swarm area. If you have the queen, then they'll stand up really high on their legs, and their abdomen's up in the air, and their stingers sticking out. And if you put your nose down by it, it smells like lemon pledge or lemongrass. And they're letting the other bees know that they're happy with their house, that they just found a great house, and all the other ones will start kind of funneling down there. You'll never get all the bees, but you'll get most of them. And then you close it, put your strap around it, throw it in the back of your car or in the back of your truck, and take off. Now, I did that once, and I was heading back, and I got a cell phone call, and they said, "Hey, we got a swarm." I'm like, okay. So I stopped by the post office, and I grabbed a box, one of the shipping boxes, and I duct taped the bottom of it, and I showed up, and I dropped them into the box. I closed the top, duct taped it, popped a couple little holes in it for air, but not too much, because they will start eating their way out. Put it on the truck seat beside me, started heading out to home. Got another call, went over to another guy. Luckily, I had grabbed a couple boxes when I was there. Next one in that box, taped it up, put it on the seat. So I'm holding 2 boxes of bees beside me in my truck with another, the hive in the back of the truck driving home. So it's very easy. But when they call you and say, "Yeah, we got a swarm," okay, how high is it? And if it's too high, get a ladder. Don't get crazy. It's freebies, but don't get too high. Yeah, you just got it, didn't you? I've been in the back of my truck with the ladder wedged in the back of my truck up against a tree. Then I'm, up on the very top of the ladder. It's shaking. I got 3 sections of pole with a bucket tied at the top, and I'm trying to get hit the limb to make the swarm fall in the bucket. And then I pull it down real quick, go down the ladder really quick, and throw it in a box. If it's going to cost you a harm in any way, or possibly just rethink it, it's not that important. They will fly off. There's a great book called Honeybee Democracy. It is incredible to read. Tom Seeley has these bees off on an island for research. They can't make the mainland because typically they only fly about 1 mile to 2 miles. They can go. Most beekeepers know they can fly up to 5 miles. New research says 8 miles, but they basically, by the time they got their full stomach and they make it back to their hive, they're out of nectar. But they can fly 8 miles. His island's further away. But honeybee democracy, bees are the only ones that can recognize the number 0 besides humans. They actually measure the inside of the hive or inside of a cavity, and then they bring it back. And when they're in that swarm stage, that's where they're all determining. They all go off to different ones. They all, they basically see each other's ideas. If there's 3 different cavities, they'll all come back. They just, and then, switch sides. They all go to each one, come back, make a decision as a colony to which one's the best one, and then they fly off to that permanent home. So it's a very interesting book. There's a lot more information in that book than just that, but it's really good.
Beehive Democracy, is that what you said?
Honeybee Democracy. It's a big coffee table size book. It's got bees on its weight. So yeah.
What about, I know we touched on this a bit, but do bees fight each other like hives too close or something?
Hives too close ain't a big deal. My hives are very close together, but they're not in a windy area. If you have a windy area and all your hives are in a line, then the beehive on the very end of the downwind will be very populated, because when the bees come in, if they have a full stomach, they're more than welcome to come in the hive and look around and do whatever. So if the wind's constantly pushing them down towards the other hive, then that one hive is going to have a lot more resources, and that hive's going to build much quicker, because mom's going to lay a lot more eggs because, hey, we got a lot more food. The first hive that doesn't have as many bees coming in because they're all getting pushed down, she will lay less eggs because, you don't want to build too big if you don't have the food coming in the door. That's how smart these little critters are, insects. And so, but when the dearth comes along, they will rob each other. And it's basically, a lot of people call it the robbing season versus the dearth. And it's basically because there's nothing else out there for them to get other than each other's honey. And a bigger colony will pick on a smaller colony and basically go in there. And if she has a full stomach, she'll go in there, she'll look around, and they're like, hey, whatever. Well, then she goes back, she tells everybody, hey, check out this hive down here. There's a bunch of resources. So what they do is they go in there and they will try to find the queen first off, kill her, because now all the nurse bees inside the hive are going, oh crap, we got to build a new queen. We got to make a new queen. So now you have less guard force on the front entrance, and all the bees are coming in there, and they just basically overpopulate them with, the amount of bees coming in there, and they just fight to the death. And it's very hard to stop this situation once it happens. So usually during the dearth, you want to reduce your entrance down to, the size of bee, 3/8 of an inch. And that way they can guard that much easier.
I'm surprised nobody's ever made a video game. Maybe they have, but this sounds like a strategy video game, like Age of Empires or something, like that's crazy.
So
yeah, go ahead.
The facial recognition on your phone, that came from honeybees. Did you know that? I think I talked about that, didn't I?
I don't think so.
When we were at the prep camp. Okay, so years ago, I'm a computer programmer. So years ago, when we still had the bulletin boards, and that was the only way we really could talk to people on the internet because it was so new. We were trying to figure out, all the stuff that they were doing in Star Trek. Even though I'm not a huge Trekkie, I'm a Star Wars fan, but we were trying to figure out what they were doing and how they were doing it. And one day we were talking about facial recognition. That'd be really cool to do. And we were like, well, how would we go about that? Well, there was a beekeeper in the group, and this was long before I was a beekeeper. And he talked about, bees actually will measure the size of your face, how far your nose sticks out, how far your eyes stick in, the size of your ears. They have facial recognition. They can tell the depth and the width. And so he went on and he made facial recognition. So that was really cool. So like if you have a really windy area, you can put a square on the one hive, put a circle on another, put a diamond on another, and the bees will come back and they will actually recognize which entrance is theirs because they can recognize shapes. And they can even actually recognize a full circle from just an outline of a circle.
Wow.
Yeah, they're really smart critters. they just keep me learning more and more. So
I got one question here. It might be a good one to end up on for this evening. Thank you for, we've stuck with this an hour and a half, even though we got a little late started for you. But yeah. Hunter wants to know, do you have a class, lectures, or books? And in general, just plug yourself. Like how can people find more or learn from you?
If you go to, was it beacons.io/TheBeeManJay, then I have my website on, or a bunch of links on there, but you can find me as TheBeeManJay on YouTube here or any social media. I'm on, I think, about 18 or 20 different social media platforms. Always posting stuff. I do go around. I do give lectures. I haven't started classes yet. I haven't wrote a book. My daughters wrote several books. Everybody in the family seems to be writers, but me. But I do go around. I give lectures or talks at bee conferences, conventions. I was just at Hive Life, and I did a talk on common mistakes of beekeepers, and I packed the room because everybody wants to know. That's a great lecture. And I told them, I said, put me in a bigger room. It's not because of me. It's because of the topic. Sure. And you notice I like to ramble on sometimes. And a lot of people say that's where I do much better, because I am rambling on. I just start spitting out all these different facts. And I know somebody over here said that, they're going to have to go back and rewatch this a couple times. And my buddy over here, Kyle, I actually went to high school with him. So nice.
So we need to get you. We should get you at. I'd love to have you at Self-Reliance Festival at some point. I not that I run it, but my friends run it, and I'm sure I could help you out with that, because that's in Camden, which is, what's that, 3-4 hours from you? Not that far. So
I ain't far. I drive further.
I'll make the connection in the back end there and see, because I'd love. I have one in spring and one in fall every year, and you would love the folks that come there.
Cool, excellent.
Like me, but weirder. I get no. All better.
So our kind of people.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'd love to have you back on at some point, Jay. Maybe in 2-3 months or something. And we'll get some. What I'll do is I'll put out the feelers. Anyway, and we will get all the questions we can for bees, and maybe we'll do like a frequently asked questions type thing with you, because that would be so much fun.
Cool. Yeah. Anything I can help people to become a better beekeeper, better human in general. I mean, I'm always here to help out. That's what I like doing. I found my calling is I like to help people. Absolutely. It makes me feel good.
Well, brother, if you want to hang in the back for just 1 second, I'll close up the show here, and I'll be right back with you.
All right. Sounds good.
Guys, it's once in a while that you run into somebody as interesting as Jay. And it was just in passing. I was at Prepper Camp last September, and a good buddy of mine, he's like, you need to talk to Jay. You need to chat with him. And I'm like, okay. He goes, no, I mean it. You need to talk to Jay. And he was not wrong. Jay there was things we didn't even talk about. We didn't even touch about vintage tech. We didn't talk about homesteading. We didn't talk about prepping. So if you've got other questions for Jay, we're going to have him back. He's a friend of the show. I can, somebody whom I've met and sat down and chatted with in real life. So if there's any way, shape, or form you can support him, do it. I pinned his Instagram link in the comments tonight, and it's also out. If you're listening to this in audio or watching the replay in video, it's there. So give him some love, give him some support, folks. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.